Hey, hello, Dr. Freed. Welcome to the Parenting Reframe podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be here because I think parents and teachers are the most undervalued, underpaid positions on the planet and the most important.
Uh, I know I completely agree. I work with parents, both in the context of parent coaching, and I was a teacher for 12 years, and then I got my master's, and now I'm a pediatric speech therapist. So I work with both neurodiverse learners and neurotypical kiddos. And I have to tell you, it's interesting. You were my first introduction to astrology, and I want to kind of let the audience know a little bit about you. And I'll let you do that because you can kind of eloquently explain it. But I love the kind of perfect hybrid of your psychology background coupled with astrology. I think prior to becoming familiar with your work, astrology to me felt kind of not tangible and not accessible for whatever reason. And I grew up in the era of magazines, so it was always like you looked for your horoscope on, in the back of the last page of the magazine and things of that sort. But it's really so much more than that. And I think you helped me to understand that. I loved your book, A Map to Your Soul. I love your new product for parents, and we'll get into that. But before we dive too deep, can you share a little bit about sort of your psychology and the way the astrology worlds come together and how that really influences or impacts your point of view?
Thank you. Yes, well, I started studying both psychology and astrology at about 19 years old, and I'm 66 now. I'm so proud to say and so
Yes.
glad to be older and wiser and fit. Anyway, psychology has always been the study of the condition of the human soul and how to treat the maladies and the adversities, and also how to strengthen the resources. And my specialty for years was post-traumatic growth, how to help people undo traumatic responsiveness. Astrology is what we call your cosmic DNA, which is when we look at your chart at the moment you're born, the time you're born, the place you're born. It's an actual map of the soul. What are your life lesson plans? What are your resources? What are the types of inner conflicts you'll have? What are the challenges? It's a very good map, but it's only a map. It
Mm,
doesn't tell us how you're going to drive
yeah.
or what vehicle you'll bring to the party. So, the combination of psychology, the treatment of the condition of the soul, with astrology, understanding the map of the soul, for me, being an incredibly practical person, is a very practical blending of two forms of healing and transformation.
Absolutely. And that's what I get from your work. So when I read A Map to Your Soul, I remember thinking at the time, this every parent needs to read this book. I'm obviously in that space, so I'm always thinking that way. I'm also a parent of now two adults, and the when I work with parents, it just comes up time and time again where I think there is always this sort of interference for a lot of different reasons as to how do we accept and learn who our child is and then navigate our parenting decisions from that space. It tends to be more of a imposition of like, this is how you're supposed to be, this is how you should be, and let's aim to, guide every parenting decision until it points us in that direction. And so I love your work so much. And when I was reading A Map to Your Soul, I remember it really shifted the way I even connected with my husband and with my kids. And essentially, I think what I'm getting at is it allowed for them to be who they are with some understanding that we come into this world with not a complete predestiny, but some wiring that sort of predisposes us to a certain way of being. And then we adjust and shift based on the experiences that we have. So when you wrote A Map to Your Soul, were you thinking to yourself, like, were you thinking at one point you were talking to specifically parents, or was it really to anybody who is looking to make meaningful connections via communication, acceptance, things of that nature?
Well, A Map to Your Soul was conceived because I had a passion to share some wisdom after my first book, Use Your Planets
Mm-hmm.
Wisely. And then Gwyneth Paltrow and Kiki from Goop and Random House had conversations with me and asked me, could you write a book that is astrology friendly, because people are into astrology, but if you had no astrology, it still would be useful. And that really spoke to me because I don't need people to believe in
Mm-hmm.
astrology. That is not my mission. The only thing I care about is growth, open heartedness, and connection. So if my writing and wisdom can help people in that direction, that's what motivated me to write that book that way. So people that are into astrology will totally be interested in the houses and the elements. But if you just read each chapter as you have as a parent,
Mm-hmm.
you still, no matter what, would investigate great new ways of being with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what it achieves. So I was so excited when I subscribed to your Substack newsletter, and I love it. And I have to say, for anybody who's listening, your newsletter for me, it feels like a warm cup of tea on a cold day. There is something so warm and nurturing in reading it. It's, I want to say, even poetic sometimes. Like, it's very, your writing is so beautiful. So, um, when I saw that you were coming out with Cosmic Parenting, I got so excited because I thought, oh my goodness, I can't wait to see how this is going to play out and what it's going to look like. And tell me a little bit more about how that bridge was sort of built into being the next thing that you wanted to create or produce.
My partner, Randy Friedman, and I, in 1999, co founded a nonprofit for teens and parents and educators called AHA.
Mm-hmm.
It's now 25 years old, served over 75,000 teens and parents. So, a huge part of my career has been training parents, educators, and teens. And I really have, as I said in the beginning of the show, the most empathy by far for parents and educators. And I wanted to create something that would help families have a neutral way, an enjoyable way to get to know each other better. It was my passion to come up with some way that that could happen. Now, I do want to say, because I like to give credit, and I have the deck in front of me here, that this deck really got to be as good as it is. One, it is my words, but I had a great editor, and this artist is like blowing my
Mm-hmm.
mind. It's such beautiful art. I hope you think that
Yes,
too.
yes.
So I do want to say, as a creative, I did write it, but it would never have been as good without the editor and the artist. So I find a lot of satisfaction in a vision coming into fruition in a team.
Mm. Yeah, and everybody kind of bringing their part, and their piece in it. It is so beautiful. It's the first thing I commented on when I opened it. I thought, "Oh my gosh, it is just stunning to look at." And then certainly your words, illuminate a lot as well, and it's a really wonderful resource. It was funny. I was getting my haircut the other day, and my hairstylist is pregnant with her first, and I told her I was going to be interviewing you on Friday. And she said, "Wait, what is it?" And I started to describe cosmic parenting. I said, "Well, it's this really, it's a parenting. Essentially, it's this deck," I said, "and you have to do your natal chart and everyone in the family. And then from there, you look at all six. I might be saying this wrong, but it's planets or houses." And
Yeah, 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 yeah,
okay.
perfect.
And
Yeah.
then from there, you read essentially as if it's the child, sort of describing their needs based on each planet and what their sign is. And she's due in July, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm already thinking about he might be a Cancer or he might be this."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you're not,
yeah,
and
yeah,
she's
yeah.
doing this, and I said, "Okay." So I promised that that would be my gift to her, as your cosmic parenting deck, because I think it's an incredible tool. So I was telling you before we started recording that I did this. My husband and I actually, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on this. My kids are older. My daughter just turned 18 and my son is 20. And my husband and I did this without them first. So we did their natal chart. We found their birth certificates. It was funny. Either of us couldn't recall the minute they were born or the time. We knew obviously the dates. So we got all of that in order. And I thought it was a nice practice for he and I to kind of go, "That's interesting. Like, I do think Hannah does that, or I do think Adrian is is sort of expressive in this way, because it does sort of, you go through and break down what each planet is representing and what it means in terms of how they present to the world or their essence or different things like that. So did you have a certain way in mind of how you wanted families to use this, or did you kind of feel like, I want to give them this tool, it's very easy to navigate, I will say that, and just kind of let it kind of manifest or be whatever it needs to be for each family?
Well, number one, I love you and your husband. Let's give you 100 gold
Thank
stars.
you.
But the fact that you spent the time together to do this tells me what a great relationship you have, which is really my biggest passion is love and how people are connecting. So I'm so moved you did that. I wanted this to be easy to use. I wanted people to do it any way they wanted to do it. My main point about all systems of typology or understanding people, they should be conversation starters, not conversation closers.
Yes.
So when you present it to your daughter or your son, you have a daughter and a
Mm-hmm.
son, right?
Yes.
And you say, hey, your Venus is in Aries and this is what it says. It's not, and so that's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's how does that fit or how does that not fit? It's a conversation opener.
Yeah.
To me, the biggest thing missing in our country, in our parenting, in our communities is
Mm.
curiosity. When we are certain, we are no longer close.
Yeah.
So to me, the best relationships, the most open, loving households are one in which we say, I don't know, tell me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Tell me more about that. So I wanted the cards to be a conversation starter, and you have done that.
Yeah.
So good for you.
Thank you. No, they absolutely are. I think that was achieved. So, what I was going to mention is that the beauty in it is then, so the next day I went through it with my daughter and I said, oh, this is something that it's really cool and it's about astrology. And I said, it breaks down into 6 different planets. So I kind of explained it to her. And then she read each of her cards aloud. And I said to her, what do you think? Or what's going through your mind as you read it? And she said, it's interesting. At first, I wouldn't have thought this about myself, but in the context of social situations, that is how I am. So it started to allow, like, there are times, obviously, I think you have an older child too, that we're not with them a lot. So I always am curious to know what they're like in these other social situations. And so it really opened the door for her to share so much more about these different sides of herself in different contexts. My son's coming home from college tonight for the weekend, so I'm going to do it with him as well. I'll keep you posted. But it was really interesting, and it did exactly that. It started that conversation. And at one point she said, I probably would have felt this way 6 months ago, but I'm aware of it now, and it's something that I'm working on. Like, I think one of them was she can retreat a lot or maybe become slightly distant depending on what's coming up for her. And she said, like, that's actually true, but I'm very aware of it, and I'm trying to recognize, when do I need the space and when can I push through and not necessarily keep pulling away. So I loved that aspect of it a lot. My husband was saying the same thing. It really did start those conversations for us.
Well, I have a quick story. I went out to dinner with 6 adult friends, and I gave them each a deck. And one of my good friends, who's nearly 50, was looking at her moon card, which describes your non negotiable needs
Mm-hmm.
emotionally. And I said, what do you think? Because I don't know. She said, all of it's true, but I wouldn't have known that at all until a few years ago doing all the personal growth work. I wouldn't have known this because my mother wasn't able to address my needs or
Mm-hmm.
meet my needs. And I said, true for a lot of us. Let me ask you, if your mother had read this card to you when you were 6 or 8, what would be different? And she immediately said, I would have felt seen.
Mm.
And that touched me. So I guess another idea is that start these conversations early, because my point of view is that every parent is doing their very best.
Yeah.
And we weren't trained to be parents.
Mm-mm.
We're trained for a lot of things, but there's no parenting training. So everyone's doing their best without a toolkit.
Yeah.
So this is a toolkit, one option, many options out there, but I think it's a joyful and loving toolkit.
Absolutely. And it's a toolkit that I think easily kind of blends and mixes in with other approaches or other ways of looking at something. I think it's a nice complement to however you're already parenting. It brings a lot of awareness around this idea of who your child is, how they communicate and express themselves in the world, how they want to be seen or be appreciated and valued. And I think those are, such important things. And I agree with you. I was thinking that as my kids are now older, and I was thinking, what would I have thought had I had this chance to do this with them when they were younger, right? And I think there is always that inherent desire to feel seen. And I cannot wait to share this with nieces and nephews because I think it will be such a great practice to see. And you wrote the cards in a way, at least it felt to me, that a younger child could easily participate and read it and ask themselves questions about themselves or even about their parents. So I think that was, really beautifully done. And I love that your friend described it that way. And, I do think along with being a conversation starter, it allows for kids and parents to open up, right? Like for us to be able to say, actually, we're like this. And actually, there's a lot of humor to it as well. My husband is a Libra and he likes things a certain way and he's very efficient and we're all very grateful to him for that. But yeah, the minute we started to read some of his, I mean, my daughter was dying. She's like, it's like somebody was spying on us and they wrote the cards. And so I thought that was great. So regarding, for cosmic parenting, for somebody who, let's say, maybe isn't very familiar with astrology, what would you say to them in terms of like how to really embrace the idea of using this deck, and where would you just have them start in terms of just approaching the idea or utilizing it as a tool?
Well, I think the easiest way for anyone to approach this is we all know that we're made up of parts. Like
Yeah.
I have my enthusiastic part, and I have my kind of bratty part, and I have my very stubborn part. We have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of
Yeah.
parts. Everyone knows that about ourselves. This deck is simply a way to look at your parts and discuss them with other people and maybe get a little bit more aware of how you seem to others so you can always make choices around that. So, for example, I know that I can be quite stubborn and I can also be very open minded. I have both parts.
Mm,
So if I'm aware I'm leaning into my stubbornness versus my open mindedness, I get a choice.
mm,
Oh, I think I'd rather be open minded. A question I ask myself a lot lately is where do I want myself to end up in this thought
oh,
process?
that's great.
Closed or open?
Yeah.
Closed or open?
Mm-hmm.
Resentful or grateful?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the cards are just a way, even if you don't believe in astrology, to have a parts discussion and a playful investigation of how we occur to others that we care about and how they occur to us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you kind of said I go like, how do I want this to, what do I want to do here? Do I want to be closed? Do I want to be open? And as my kids have gotten older, and I was sharing this with a family that I'm working with right now, that ultimately, like for me, if I'm looking at this kind of the whole scope of parenting from younger children to now older, it really is a practice and restraint over time because you have to sort of allow them to struggle and allow them to have pain and allow them, and I'm by nature, I like to fix and I like to solve. And if I see they're having a problem that feels like it's an easy fix, I want to jump right in. And there's two things that I think have been helpful. One is, as mostly my teenage daughter, but I do it with my son too. When they come to me and they ask a question or they start to vent about something, I will start off by saying, before we start, tell me what you need from me. If it's only to listen, I'm happy to just listen. And that's actually more for me than them. So I don't find myself jumping in and saying, oh, just do this, or, feeling reactive or emotional with whatever it is they're sharing. And sometimes I'll say, or do you need guidance? Do you want me to share or give input? And it just frames the conversation in a way so that way they're feeling like they're aware of also why they're coming to me for it. And then sometimes they'll even say, let me just start talking, just listen, and then I'll let you know if I want advice. And so sometimes we just start and I'll say, okay, but it does really help. So I think in doing the cosmic parenting as well, I noted so many points in that when I was reading their cards where that practice can be really useful too, or just even allowing for space, right? Like just allowing people to share and not trying to kind of shove down their throats the way you would do something.
Now I have one audit to what you're saying.
Please tell me.
Ready?
Yes.
Because, 66, a grandma, adult children, the whole thing. Okay, so here's the deal. Yes, it's all about restraint. Couldn't agree more. Same thing, I'm a fixer.
Yeah.
But it's also don't spare people necessary pain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because one thing I've seen a lot of is people allowing children or adult children to get away with bad behavior because they don't want the conflict.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that we all, including me, need genuine feedback to improve
Mm-hmm.
ourselves and to be the best we can be. I will give you a case in point. Today, I had a man friend that I've been friends with for 30 something years. He's the husband of my best friend. And he said, "Can we get together for breakfast?" And I don't see him that much. And I said, "Sure." So I thought I could get in before the show. So I went to breakfast and he said, "I just really need to tell you something." I said, "Okay." He goes, "And I don't want to shame you. I just want to tell you." I said, "Okay." He said, "I think I have felt really neglected by you in the last 2 years because you spent all the time with your friend,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't feel you're caring toward me. And I really feel hurt and I miss you." And I said, "Wow, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't gotten my attention. And I totally see how you would interpret it as that I don't care about you, but that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do better."
Yeah.
Now, you think through that same situation. What if he had never talked to me? What would have happened?
Mm. Right.
He said, "I notice I'm distancing from you." And I went, "You're the best guy in the whole world to ask me to breakfast to tell me this."
Mm-hmm.
And I really needed to hear it.
Yeah. That's beautiful, but it also speaks to how safe you've probably allowed him to feel, right? We can only
Right.
share those things within the context of like, I know this person will hold space for me while I share this difficult message or whatever that might be.
Yes. But what I'm saying to you, Mama,
Mm-hmm.
all you parents listening to this, you are that safe
Yes.
person for your kids. So if they have done something hurtful or harmful or spoiled or ungrateful or rude or you name
Yeah.
it, restraint isn't the right thing.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so for me, what I've seen a lot of is things that get absolutely buried because I don't want the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be pushed away.
Yeah.
So the bad behavior rules the day.
Ugh.
And that cannot happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Amen to that. I absolutely agree with you. Certainly not in the sense, I think when I say restraint too, I'm thinking in the context of like my desire to fix or my desire to
Oh, yeah.
problem solve, of like, sometimes doing nothing is the answer, but not when there is blatant, bad choices happening or behaviors that you don't want to condone. That's always a completely different way of handling that. And I agree with you. I think we avoid it sometimes because we can't even fathom what to do or how to manage it. So it's like if everyone just tiptoes around it, tomorrow will be a better day, right? And we kind of
Well,
ignore.
also for moms, this is that I see the most with moms, but I don't know if it's true for dads. I just see it with moms. The fear of being broken in connection is sometimes greater than the desire to have an authentic connection.
Yeah. Oh,
And so, for example, I see a lot of young people these days not being so appreciative or kind or grateful to their
mm,
mothers, kind of like the mothers just owe them all this unconditional loving and care.
mm-hmm,
It breaks my heart because it's like, hello,
mm-hmm.
that's not the way this goes.
Yeah.
This person deserves every bit of dignity and kindness you could ever imagine for all they do for you. It's not that you are owed that.
Yes, absolutely. I had I don't know if you know Joe Newman, but he wrote Raising Lions. It's yeah, and he's been on twice, and we were talking actually the last time he was on about this idea of the family being a web, and it made me think of like some of the cards that I had read in Cosmic Parenting, because sort of where in relation am I to somebody else? And he said, the way we have to look at it is essentially we've gotten to a place where we don't want to ever set boundaries for our kids. We don't want to disappoint our kids. We don't want our kids to struggle. We give multiple choices because we feel like we want them to have autonomy and agency. And it's true, all of the things that he's describing. But he said somehow, some way, meeting the needs of others is getting a bad rap. And the truth is we have to teach our kids to honor how they feel and what they need while they simultaneously recognize and can meet the needs of another, particularly within a family dynamic.
But particularly for the mothers,
Yes.
as we're coming up to Mother's Day, I want to say the person, and I did it to my mother, so guilty as charged, but particularly the mothers need to be
Mm.
seen with their needs and
Yeah.
wants. They don't exist just to meet the needs of others.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's for so long that's been the narrative, right? That, even if you describe, I think I was reading Dr. Becky Kennedy had written something about, I don't want to be a selfless parent, and I don't want to be described as a selfless mother when my kids get older. And it is true, if we describe it feels like the good mom is the mom who sacrificed everything, sleepless nights, all this kind of martyr. And she said, I want my kids to go. My mom knew how to take a break when she felt overwhelmed. My mom knew how to pause. My mom took care of herself. My mom had friends. My mom, right? And so that's something that even reading it can feel triggering to some parents, because it's all we've known for so long, is that this idea of parenting, especially motherhood, is meant to look that way.
Agreed. I know Dr. Becky Kennedy, and she is extremely dedicated.
Yeah, absolutely. Her work is
Yeah.
fantastic in this space. I recommend her work often. She is great. I wanted to ask you, it's interesting because my natal chart, I think, is, do you ever work with people who kind of don't know if it's right or wrong? Like, I am a Scorpio, but it's almost across the board. And
What do you mean across the board?
I'm a sun, moon, rising. Four of my six planets are Scorpio. I know.
Wow.
And the other two, I have it jotted down on my phone. I don't remember the other two, and I promise I'm not asking
Well, let
you.
me do your chart real quick. So, because I can tell you don't really relate as much to the Scorpio. What's your date?
It's November 18th, and I was born 1979.
Oh, you're just like my adult kids' age. Okay.
Yeah,
What time
at
do you know?
6:10 in the morning
And
in Royal
where?
Oak, Michigan.
Okay. Give me a second and I'll be able to. This is where it's very complex. And the reason you're probably not relating is because it's so much more complex than, oh, I'm a this, a that, a this.
Yes.
So let's look at you. All right. So, what is your question in all of
So I
this?
will just
Now,
oh, I'm sorry. Go
yeah, no, you
ahead.
go.
Okay. So I was going to say, most people, when I tell them, when they'll say, what are your three? Usually it's like the sun, moon, and the rising that I get asked. And I'll say, I'm a triple Scorpio. And it's almost like
Mhm.
when someone tells you they're getting over the stomach flu, and you're like, oh, okay, there's like three steps back. It seems that it's met with a response that's like something's wrong with that. And then when I've read about it, it feels like we're very moody. I know even when I was reading your book, and there were parts of your book, I actually think, because you spoke of a story about your daughter when she was younger, and she's a water sign, I
You have
believe.
the scary part. Uh
Yes, and
huh.
she
Uh
was
huh. Mm
describing herself and saying that I think people are scared of me. Mine was the
hmm. Mm
opposite. I felt fearful of people and always doing something
hmm.
wrong or
Mm
making
hmm.
mistakes. So I was
Mm
likely
hmm.
communicating the
Mm
same thing your daughter was communicating, which was this sense of like
hmm.
there's some fearfulness around this
Mhm,
dynamic.
mhm, mhm,
Um,
mhm.
I relate to parts of it, but it just feels like I feels
Okay,
like I
let
get
me help you
okay.
out. Let me help you out. Okay, so indeed, you have all these planets in Scorpio. And this is where it gets very complicated. You also have Sun, Uranus, Mercury in Scorpio conjoined, which is the fountain of genius and innovation.
Mm,
So you're a Scorpio that goes up, not down. You invent, you create, you make transformation for yourself and others.
mm,
But the other reason you don't entirely relate to all the Scorpio is you have two other things in your chart that are sunny, 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 optimistic, not at all
mm,
Scorpio. You have Venus and Neptune conjoined in Sagittarius, the most adventurous, positive, optimistic, creative combination.
mhm,
And then at the top of your chart in your career, you have Mars with Jupiter, and Mars is in Leo. So it's all about love and possibility and going places with people philosophically and otherwise. So if I were to say the complexity of you is this, you have a very deep, deep, introverted, reflective, self-doubting side, a very strong tendency for self-shame, etc. You have an incredibly optimistic, cheerful, adventurous, opportunistic side, and then you have an incredibly driven, creative, loving, warm side. How does that
wow.
sound?
I have never, that is amazing. That sounds perfect. It's spot on with the even the self-doubt piece, and I've never had it described that way, but I can relate to everything you just said.
Well, see, and this is like a 3-minute synopsis of
Mhm.
your chart.
Mhm.
This is what I've done for my whole life is read the whole chart, not the pieces. And I think that people have misunderstood astrology because they read the pop sign
Mhm.
astrology. Or recently, somebody who I admire, Adam Grant, came out with this horrible attack on astrology based on sun sign astrology, which
Mhm.
is just you're a Scorpio. And sun sign astrology is as shallow as saying, I would know you by the color of your hair.
Yeah.
That's how shallow it is compared to the art of astrology, which has all these planets. Then there's geometry, then there's angles, then there's timing. I mean, it's so intricate.
Mhm.
It takes at least 3 years to learn this.
Oh my goodness.
So, of course, you felt misidentified as only the Scorpio, but certainly when you do the cards and see Venus in Sagittarius and Mars in Leo, you see another thing
Mhm.
because those are not Scorpio at all.
Yeah. That's
So,
so
anyway, I'm
fascinating.
glad you gave me the opportunity to clear that up for you. But I think your Scorpio part is your genius of transformation because you're clearly very devoted to transformation. You don't want things to stay stuck and repeating.
Oh my goodness. I can't tell you how much this speaks to me in this exact very moment as we're sitting here. So thank you for taking the time to do that. It means so much and it really resonates. Yeah, and I loved your response to Adam Grant. It was so eloquent. It was perfect.
Well,
You're
I thought what was funny is because I really admire
yeah.
him, but as somebody put in response to him, here were 4 things you said to have an open mind. Be around people you disagree with, look into things you know nothing about or something. And he didn't do it. He
Yeah.
he just went after pop astrology, which is so unscientific and so completely uninformed. I was shocked. And of course, I offered him a free reading, which he hasn't even responded to. But I think this is my point. I want for parents, for me, for everyone, what have we got to lose learning something new?
Yes.
I'm like, I'm not cooked.
Yeah.
Let's keep
Right.
learning.
And who gets to decide, you know, what's right and what's wrong and this is good and this is bad. It's like this binary thinking and I what I got from him when which I agree with you. It's like the antithesis of who Adam Grant is up until now. I mean, but he wrote a book called Think Again, like, and the whole
Yeah.
premise of the book is to not have a
Yeah.
fixed mindset. And I felt like that
Yeah.
entire post was a very fixed mindset, ill informed.
Yeah.
It just went against
But
everything.
again, I've made those mistakes. Listen, this is where I love Adam Grant. I love myself. I've been a jerk. I've said things I regret. You know, I don't hold any of this too tightly,
Yeah.
especially parenting. Let me say this because this is your thing is my greatest joy is saying to my kids, I screwed up.
Mm,
I made a mistake. Help me understand.
yeah.
You know, I can tell you I have just this many people in my life that can do the same.
Mm,
Most people are so reticent to say, I made a mistake. I didn't listen. They'd rather be right than be close. And me, I'd rather be close than be right, but we've got to have a conversation, Adam and I.
yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
tell me more about
Yeah.
this. How has astrology harmed you, Adam?
Hmm.
Because he clearly is upset about it. Like, let me hear. What did it do to
Yes,
you?
absolutely. No, I loved it. And to your right, you mentioned repair, and I couldn't agree with you more. It took me, I think, I have my own theory on parenting is that these souls come to us not by accident, but it's a very intentional relationship that we're meant to have and experience, and really for our own personal growth along with theirs. And I've learned so much. I had my kids fairly young, and I can sort of see myself, from when I had them until now. And I will tell you, repair was one of the things that brought us the closest. It allowed me to shed any kind of like what I call a parenting ego, which is like that part of you that feels you have to have this parent facade on to think you're doing the right thing or presenting to the world a certain way. And it was when I started to shed that and I would start to say, I really didn't show up the way I meant to yesterday, and I want to talk to you about it. And I just want you to know I don't feel great about it. It was in those moments that I think it freed my kids at the same time to also be imperfect around me and my husband.
Yeah. I, and I'm with my partner for 28 years. Well, you have been a long time
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah, I'll be 23 years.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and you know, you just can't make it with another person unless you can say, I screwed up. I'm sorry. Because, this is a tough thing to be human. I
Right.
mean, just,
Right.
and nobody's got it perfect and nobody's figured it all out. And so I so appreciate your podcast, what you're up to, you and your husband. It's a remarkable thing you're
I
doing.
appreciate that so much. Yeah, it's funny. I was reluctant to I started just writing on the topic of parenting, and I did it for local magazines in the Detroit area. And then people started to reach out saying, "Do you do consults? Do you do calls? Do you do?" And I said no for a very long time because it was like I didn't love giving advice, and I felt like every parenting sort of journey is really specific and unique, and I couldn't solve it for you in one call. And anyways, I was reluctant for a really long time. And then I started to kind of hear the same story in my day work of parents just saying the same thing of like, it sounded always something like this, little Johnny is engaging in this behavior. How do I get him to stop? And there was this separation of parent child behavior connection, all of it. And so I thought, let me see if I can help kind of connect these dots. And I did it as much as I could through writing. And then I slowly started to work with people one on one. And it's been a really wonderful process just to have that intimacy and to have that ability to kind of hold space. I'd never judge whatever parenting decision they're making. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this because I'm currently doing a little series on TikTok right now about kids who struggle to lose. And it's really struck a nerve. And I think it's interesting because what I'm starting to get in the feedback is parents are saying, my child is so afraid of losing, they won't try. Or even if they're, let's say, in a game or even a simple family game at home they could be playing, and they start to forecast and see that they likely won't be the winner, then they want to immediately quit. And to me, it speaks to sort of a larger cultural concern, if that's the right word. I've never been on social media until I'm 44 now. I think at 38 was the first time I even went on Instagram. I didn't have any of it. And one of the first things that struck me was parents were posting their kids' report cards. right? And I don't know if you've seen this. And I was like, people do this?
I've never seen it, but that's bizarre.
Right? I know. I thought the same thing. I
Oh,
thought this is really wild. And then my both of my kids played sports competitively, so I understand that world. And I'm not competitive myself though. And so I also started to see, when a child achieves something in a sports context, that's what gets posted. And I get it, right? You're proud, you're excited, you want to share. It's a group of friends that you're discussing. I'm not saying not to do those things, but when we live in a culture that only celebrates achievement, and that's the thing we're showing, that's the thing we're presenting to the world, what does it say to our kids that when they lose, how should they interpret that? Right? Because every action you're doing up until that point is saying it's the win that matters, it's the straight A's that matter, it's the honor roll mention or whatever it
and
might
yet
be.
it's fascinating because I'm very much about this topic too. That all of the most successful people, their coaching is fail fast, fail a lot, learn. It's the opposite of win, win, win.
Mm-hmm.
It's like fail
Yeah.
more. And I have failed so much, like so, so much. And that has what has given me such great success because my unafraid to
Yes.
try
Mm-hmm.
and go for it and make a fool of myself or whatever happens, it's not stopping
Mm-hmm.
me. I learn from it. So I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, because of you, I'm going to do a post on my epic failures
Oh.
because I think that's the other piece is people aren't reporting on what have you failed at, what did you learn?
Mm-hmm.
Because let's not stop at the failing. Let's go further and saying what did you learn from that? Because when I get things easily, frankly, I don't learn a thing.
Yeah.
When things are difficult and I struggle to lose or whatever, then the lessons really go in because I had to use some emotional muscle.
Yeah. It
Fascinating.
really
I'm
is.
so about what you're about. I'm so about it.
I appreciate that so much. Yeah, it's interesting because my feedback is my answer is so simple: let them lose. Like they're asking me, like, what should we do? They're crying. Let them cry. Let them lose. Let them
Yes, but
go
also
through it and be there. And that's okay, right?
we play this game at our nonprofit with teenagers that my friend Brent taught, where you do this number counting game that there's no chance you're going to be able to do well in a
Oh,
pair.
mm-hmm.
And every time somebody messes up, they get cheers, you screwed up, you lost, hooray,
I love it.
And so we really unpack all the shame around losing and instead say, you gave it your all, yay for you. The only harm is when we don't give it our all because we're too concerned with
Mm-hmm.
performance. And that goes for everything.
Yes.
If we're too concerned with performance, we will not have an authentically fulfilling life.
Mm. Oh my goodness. That's it. Couldn't be more true. And look, we even struggle as adults, right? Managing not wanting to try something new, feeling afraid to fail, the performative piece, it's all so entangled. And I know a big part of, I try to encourage parents is like, where are we getting our kids to learn to tolerate frustration more, right? It's like if you can't tolerate frustration, then you inevitably won't be able to tolerate losing something, trying, working through a challenge, becoming resilient, all the things that are really necessary in life and all those skills that our kids need. You just see a lot of parents tiptoeing around a lot of these types of situations, and it's hard, and I understand why. I think life's gotten really busy for most families, and if a child is struggling to open a jar of Play-Doh, and they're about to lose it, it is a lot easier to walk over and just open the Play-Doh for them and hand it back to them. And I understand the reality of that too. But it's interesting that you're saying, that you played that game. And I love that because it's the idea of like almost exposure therapy to some extent. Like we're just going to walk through what it feels like to not be able to do well, or be really good at something. And I was working with a parent as a speech therapist. I had her child, and she had a little guy. He has autism, and he was school aged. And she came to me one day, and they were having a rough day, and he had a rough day at school. And she just broke down, and she said, "You know, things other parents take for granted, I've never been able to experience. I've never once had a teacher call me and say, he had a really good day today. I've never
Oh,
once been able to pick him up from school and just know that they were so happy to have him there. Everything went well. I can't take him to sporting events. I can't do a lot of those things. And it made me think of her in this world of posting perfect report cards and the championship win all over social media with other parents' celebratory moments. Like for this mother, we work together on like how do we celebrate the small wins right now because they're always there. I said while you're looking at it that way, I'm looking at it. And my session with him today, he was fantastic and he tried and he pushed through on things that were really hard for him to do, and he tolerated working through those things, and he made conversation with me, which he doesn't always want to do, right? And so I explained to her, when you're going to look at it that way, it's going to be so much harder for you. You'll always see what's not working. But I would love your thoughts on, for a parent who often in those situations, they can feel very alone. How would you sort of
yeah.
guide them?
Well, for me, and again, I've worked with all kinds of special needs, adults, children. For me, success is not what we've
Mm-hmm.
accomplished. Success is what we've accomplished in relation to the adversity we faced.
Mm,
I don't admire people that are famous just because they have a brand name at
mm-hmm.
all. I admire that kid that shows up to school despite all
Mm.
odds that they'll have a good day. And I've noticed that if we can congratulate them on that tenacity, on the effort, that will build the character.
Absolutely. Oh, I hope to God that mother's listening because those words were, I think, the perfect response to the situation she finds herself in. Well, Dr. Freed, I want to mention one more thing about the cosmic parenting before I let you go. The family connection cards that you have in there, I absolutely love. For listeners, it is, I think it's 8 to 10 cards with a lot of different sort of games, activities, ways to connect as a family. And I cannot wait to even implement some of them. I think age doesn't even matter really in some of these cases, which I love also for the flexibility piece. What sort of made you add that on to the deck, and how did that kind of come into play?
Well, in the 25 years of running the nonprofit, which we no longer run, it's in great, capable hands right now. I, with my partner and team, invented those activities,
Mm,
and we've used them with educators, parents, and teens successfully for years. And I wanted people to have them because they're tried and tested, years of great results.
uh, I love that. Yeah, they're fantastic. The connection circle one is the one I was thinking about the most. I just love the idea of, I think also like it helps parents participate in communicating with their kids in a way that doesn't have to feel like this structure of like parent, child, teaching, correcting, that there's so much more that kids get to see our humanness and we get to sort of see theirs, I think is where that connection really builds. So I love it. I can't wait to share this with more people. I know so many people are going to benefit from cosmic parenting. It's going to be a remarkable tool for them to have in their tool belt or in their toolbox. And thank you so much for being here. Just before I let you go, where can people find you if they want to learn more about all the incredible work that you do?
I think Jennifer Freed, FREED.com, will lead you to all my social media, which at this point is pretty much Instagram. And also sign up for my newsletter there on Substack because that's free. And that's how I'd like to stay in touch. And always send me emails through my website about the products, what you like about them, etc.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you for having
You're
me.
so very
This has
welcome.
been such a blessing on my day, a little miracle on my
Oh,
day today. Thank you.
likewise. Likewise. Thank you, Dr. Freed.
Thank you.